My name is Graham Pionkowski. I'm a talent acquisition leader and HR tech enthusiast, and I'm chatting with Chris next on the RecTech podcast.
Welcome to RecTech, the podcast where recruiting and technology intersect. Each month, you'll hear from vendors shaping the recruiting world, along with recruiters who'll tell you how they use technology to hire talent. Now, here's your host, the mad scientist of online recruiting, Chris Russell.
That's right, it's time for RecTech, the only podcast that helps employers and recruiters connect with more candidates through technology-inspired conversations. If you listen, you'll hear both recruiters and HR tech vendors talk about how they use tech to find talent. But first, as always, this episode of RecTech is sponsored by our friends at Job Fairing, the job fair search engine. If your company is hosting a hiring event or job fair soon, well, Job Fairing will help you promote that event to a local audience in your city. Submitting your event is free, but they'll also help you advertise it on channels like Facebook if you choose to feature it on the site for 10, 20, or 30 days at a time. It pays to advertise, so to ensure your hiring event is well attended, head over to jobfairing.com and get it listed. My guest today is Graham Pionkowski, who spent the last decade in the world of corporate recruiting and helped a number of organizations up-level their talent acquisition strategy, operations, and technologies. Most recently, he has served as the head of global talent acquisition at Bazaar Voice, a high-tech company based in Austin, Texas. Over the last few years, he's been leading all things recruiting, including the TA strategy and operationalizing the day-to-day execution to bring top talent into the organization. Graham, welcome to RecTech. It's nice to have you.
Thanks so much for having me, Chris. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, looking forward to a conversation today. So you've been in the recruiting space in the corporate world for a while. It's evolved a lot over the last decade or so. I'm curious from your perspective, what are some of the major shifts you've seen in the last couple of years? What's top of mind for you?
Yeah, Chris, you're so right. The recruiting industry does seem to be moving just at light speed right now in so many ways. From the technologies we use, the way we market our jobs, the way candidates interact with us as employers. The first major shift worth mentioning is that identifying candidates is no longer the major hurdle. The primary challenge for recruiters today has become whether they're able to engage talent and build relationships. You know, many recruiters were bound to their ATS over the past decade, but now the internet is your candidate database. And as a recruiter, you no longer need to necessarily be Boolean black belts to identify talent. Mm-hmm. So over the past few years, the sourcing tools have become very sophisticated and more user-friendly. And now it's likely anyone in your organization can search for candidates on the open web with minimal effort and little to no sourcing chops. And so there's many different options to gain access to candidate contact details through web browser extensions like Profit or simply through social media or professional sites. And it's no secret that every employee in your organization has a professional talent network that you can tap into for vetted talent, for high conversion referrals through employee referral programs and various candidate referral technologies. So instead of identification, now the challenge for recruiters is getting the conversation, which means for most of us, we need a compelling EVP to pitch passive candidates, mm-hmm. an attractive employer brand to pique the interest of candidates that we want to engage, and we need to be savvy salespeople in order to interpret their wants, their needs of our targeted talent, and create an intriguing conversation, build that relationship over time, and provide a memorable experience for them in order to be successful.
Yeah.
That's another shift I'm...
Sorry, that was that's one of the challenges because of that, Graham, I think, is that initial reach out to the candidate, right, in terms of just getting noticed by them. So talk about that really, if you could, in terms of the initial approach to reaching out to candidates through all these new sourcing technologies. I mean, like you said, it is easier to find them, but you still have to get their attention, right?
That's absolutely correct, Chris. That's really where the beauty of the internet and the social profiles allows you to do a lot of research and come up with an intriguing way to get that person's attention. The most likely top talent is being spammed from many different angles. And so the abilities for recruiters to really take a marketing perspective on how to get that person's attention and get that dialogue, is just crucial at this time.
You mentioned you've been implementing some new recruiting technologies over the past few years, in your past roles, especially in the high-tech market. Talk about some of those, if you would, how you've implemented them, some of the challenges around that.
So I think the primary challenge for me over the past few years, has been building the TA function and recruiting culture that is able to adapt quickly to the constant change and the needs of a fast-moving organization. You've got to be agile as a recruiting function to handle the fluctuating hiring needs, the varying skill sets that are coming at you, the global footprint. You're constantly problem solving. But that's the fun part, right? So let me share a few things I focused on to help us become more nimble. Okay. First things first, it's my experience that your ability to recruit is only as good as your recruiting team. So I've had the pleasure to build a team of recruiting experts with unique styles and different expertise and organize the team into work groups. So there's multiple skill sets that could be inserted into their daily workflows and our various hiring initiatives. We also borrowed a few techniques from agile methodologies like daily stand-ups and sprints and roadmaps. And we put a lot of time and energy into empowering the team with the KSAs to be strategic talent advisors to the business instead of simply being order takers. Another focus is, just getting the rest of the company involved. So I've always been in the mindset that an organization which is relying solely on the abilities of their recruiting aisle to fulfill their talent needs is going to have difficulty keeping up. So it was vital that we strengthened our company culture of always recruiting by making sure that the organization was trained up on all things recruiting, such as how do we do competency-based interviewing, making sure that they understood how to participate in our employee referral program to help get us quality leads into our pipeline, and that they took the candidate experience seriously so that it could be a key differentiator for us, and left a good impression on our talent pools, whether we got to the offer stage or not. And finally, in order to then scale and empower the business, I focused very heavily on creating a TA tech stack that enables collaboration. So to do this, I've been extremely fortunate to have had the opportunity to partner with best-in-breed vendors over the past few years, like iCIMS, most recently Lever, and other great vendors to overlay technology to help us as a recruiting function take a more candidate-centered approach, be more efficient in how we work as recruiters, provide our candidates with a standout experience when they interact with us, and just to get the business involved at all stages in the recruiting process. I feel, Chris, that being a good talent leader today means you need to get good at embracing change. And to keep up, you must be willing to be able to constantly evolve. Because what works today, as you know, might not work tomorrow.
2 follow-up questions for you, Graham. What sourcing tools were you using? And then secondly, talk about the importance of speed in hiring in terms of, especially with a lot of these top-tier tech candidates, how important is it to move quickly on them? Because I see a lot of companies still getting bogged down in their processes sometimes.
Right. No, speed is absolutely critical. A couple of the sourcing tools to mention that we used, Lever has a very differentiated product where every employee in your organization can participate in your sourcing efforts through their Chrome extension, which you can provide high conversion referral candidates. You can do lead generation simply from browsing the web or participating where you would normally work on LinkedIn, through Stack Overflow if you're an engineer. So that was very valuable to us. We also used other sourcing specific technologies such as Intello for those really heavy lifting searches that we needed to go deeper, or to help us with some of our diversity recruitment initiatives.
Gotcha.
So those were the primary sourcing tools that we employed over the last couple of years.
And how about the speed of things? I mean, I still think companies aren't quite quick enough on the draw, it seems like sometimes.
I totally agree, Chris. I think that, what we find, especially in the high-tech market, when you look at, the need for these really hot positions like data scientists and others that are going to really drive you forward, they may have dialogues going with multiple employers at one time. There's really no room to have an inefficient process. You will notice that you will lose candidates very quickly if you're not extremely quick to the draw. Yeah. And a lot of that is just doing your research, making sure that you're working very closely with the business. And I've been fortunate that the businesses I've worked with have truly understood that and been willing to move at the pace of recruiting and been more candidate-centric about that than at the pace of the organization.
Graham, talk about some of the challenges you face when implementing some of these new recruiting technologies out there. It sounds like you've done a lot of that stuff. And how does that fit into the new HR stack, do you think?
I think most of your listeners can relate here, but HR as a whole continues to struggle with being seen as both a cost center and an administrative function. That's just our reality. For most companies that get it, and those of us in the field, we understand the impact to our business results if talent acquisition is viewed as a strategic driver and worthy of investment. So the constant hurdle is being able to demonstrate the business value that recruiting technologies are bringing to the business, or could add in order to get buy-in. So, Chris, the new reality for TA leaders is you must be constantly developing your business case. Your ability to, as a business, to compete for talent and retain human capital has made this absolutely critical. So let's say you're successful in getting the green light for either upgrading or adding TA to your tech stack. Mm-hmm. The next challenge is, how do you decide what vendor to partner with and proceed with? And my advice for your listeners is to proceed with caution. There's lots of lofty claims being made, which creates lots of noise out there. But when you're shopping for new technologies and tools, and also you're getting pulled and pressure from other business units like your IT department, sure, that may want you to consolidate your contract or try and find some economies of scale with technologies that aren't necessarily best in breed for recruiting, but that your organization is already using for other things. So I think it's important to do your necessary diligence before making purchasing decisions. I think you need to consider your specific organization's present and future state. Think on the key recruiting challenges you face, and keep in mind your specific company's culture and target talent markets. Once you've gone through all the work to get buy-in, you want to make sure that you're choosing your tech wisely, and so it's successful in helping to alleviate your pain points. So I tend to look at new technologies from the viewpoint of how will this enhance my abilities to deliver results and add value to the existing tech stack. And this means taking an integrated approach, because I find disjointed systems to be extremely inefficient and oftentimes a headache to recruiters' daily workflow. Yeah. So quick example, I recently implemented Lever, as I mentioned, as the core of our TA tech stack, and was successful in integrating all but one of the complementing solutions in our toolkit. So you can imagine the efficiencies gained here, even if you simply look at it from a recruiter productivity standpoint in their day-to-day. So again, Chris, I think it's extremely important for your listeners in the field to keep in mind that the technology alone does not usually solve the problems out of the box. Recruiting technology should better enable your strategy by enhancing your processes and your operating procedures. Mm-hmm. And you need to make sure your foundations that you're laying your technologies on top of are strong to begin with. And then you'll be able to realize the significant value in the awesome recruiting tech that's out there.
Okay. And the other tip I have as far as, recruiters out there who are listening to this who might be about to embark on a new recruiting technology project is to also, think about the technology as well. So if you don't understand technology, bring somebody in who does. So maybe somebody from the IT team that can help, be a sounding board for you as far as what some of these acronyms mean, and just have them listen in on the conversations with these vendors that you're talking to. Because I think getting a technical perspective on what they're saying is also important. Would you agree?
That's fantastic advice. I totally agree. I think the more you can lean on the expertise within your business, as well as customers that have been through similar processes as you, or companies look alike, is extremely valuable to include in just your process of both evaluating new software, but as well as implementing.
Yeah. Graham, let's switch gears for a second. There's never been more HR technology than there is right now today. As you look at the landscape, I'm curious what advice you have for entrepreneurs and startups in the space who are looking to get the business of these talent leaders, get their attention. I mean, how should they approach people like you?
Yeah, well, first off, keep up the innovation. It feels to me, and I'm sure there's a number of your listeners that would agree, that HR technology has been lagging behind other industries and professions, and I'm not convinced that that's our reality anymore. It's great to begin to have access to technologies that are really enhancing our abilities to do our jobs. All that said, it also feels like a noisy space right now, and there's a lot of lofty claims. So here's a few pieces of advice for new technologies or entrepreneurs entering the space of TA tech. First, let's address those lofty claims. I have yet to find a comprehensive TA solution out there that makes all of my problems go away. So there's immediate skepticism if that's your claim. It's not a one-size-fits-all across every organization and industry. I've seen success using a particular technology at one organization and then seen that strategy fall short at another. So my recommendation would be to take a close look at the prospects that you're looking to sell your solution to in order to make sure that it's truly a good fit. Also, instead of, to that point, there's probably no solution that takes care of all of our needs at this time anyways. Instead of trying to build everything and be the best at all things talent acquisition, make it extremely easy to plug in other solutions that can complement your core product. So solutions like Lever do this extremely well. I've also had a lot of success when I was an iCIMS client. I like this strategy because it allows you to leverage the best solutions under one hood and create a truly integrated stack. The bottom line is recruiters don't need another system to log into, and so make sure your solution is easily integrated into the holistic HR tech stack. And another aspect is pricing, and I mentioned this at HR Tech. The spoiler alert here is talent acquisition departments don't tend to have these big budgets that you might think we have. Most of us talent leaders are challenged to piece together a solution in our tech stack with very limited budget and that best addresses the unique challenges that we face. So make sure that the solution is priced according to the ROI that customers like myself can realistically realize.
Yeah.
If you can't articulate or prove how your solution equates to making hires, more hires, better hires, faster hires, it's difficult for me to see the value, and it's probably more difficult for me to sell to my leadership. So the bottom line is you need to understand how the recruiting function is measured, and the ultimate indicator for whether your technology is helpful to me is whether it enhances the company's ability to hire. And take into consideration where your solution fits into the value stream of the entire HR tech ecosystem. I'm probably not going to pay the same price tag for an app that helps me contact passive candidates, for example, as I am for my entire ATS. So, and then lastly, my last piece of advice is if you don't have practitioners like those listening to your show, shaping your product and advocating for you in their social circles, it's not very likely that you're going to be successful. So make sure to get out there and get some key customers that can be your advocates.
Brand evangelist, I like it. You talked about a little bit about diversity recruiting as part of your strategy at Bizarre Voice there, Graham. Just talk about that briefly if you could, and especially around what technologies you think can help companies diversify their workforce.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, one starting point can be to ensure that your job descriptions are resonating with both, male and female genders. I like Textio as a scalable and user-friendly solution to help you do this. Generally speaking, Textio's software coaches you through writing a non-biased and just better overall job description by looking at specific words that you use or your format, in addition to a bunch of other aspects. And this straightforward technique alone can bring a lift to your gender diversity of your overall applicant pool, as well as make your brand more appealing across the sexes. In fact, we did A/B tests at my former, and the version of the job description that was revised in alignment to Textio's guidance was more effective at receiving a more gender diverse applicant pool in comparison to the job description that we had been using previously. So not sure if they're still running free trials, but if so, your listeners should take it for a spin and see if they experience the same results. I'd say personally, it was enlightening to see the gender bias even in my own writing style that I was just simply unaware of. Once your job descriptions and advertisements are better aligned to the broader spectrum of talent, you can focus on posting in places where target talent pools will view your jobs, and you can spread your messaging through your sourcing activities. One site that's new on my radar is called Jopwell, Jopwell. And their platform helps companies connect with minorities, and they focus on creating a pipeline from underrepresented communities. So you can post your positions on their site or search the candidate profiles that diverse job seekers set up themselves. In terms of sourcing tools that you can add to your tech stack and do targeted sourcing aimed at diverse candidates, I mentioned them previously, but take a look at Intello. They're one of the more robust sourcing tools that's focused on creating a solution for companies who want to better balance their talent pipelines. They've got search algorithms and easy to use features that help you discover candidate pools based on their gender, ethnicity, and even their veteran status, which was unique to me. I've been impressed by Intello, and they've been in my toolkit for a while, specifically for talent searches that, again, require that heavy lifting and that you need, that balanced pool of candidates. It's a great tool to use. And then, Chris, I want to give you a shout out. I also saw a recent post that you put on LinkedIn with a list of online resume builder resources. Yeah. And notice one specifically aimed toward military veterans. And I think this is awesome because I'm sure, as you know, it's often difficult for those of us who are searching for their skills, as well as those transitioning out of the military into the civilian workforce, to translate their skills on a resume or in an interview. And sometimes the focus on diversity efforts is solely on gender and race, which is absolutely important. But as recruiters, as TA leaders, let's think more broadly to include our veterans, to include our workers with disabilities, to include both our emerging and aging workforces and so on. So I'm a big fan of the content and training through social talent. I know, Chris, you've had the original sourcing ninja himself, Mr. Johnny Campbell, on a previous show. Yeah, myself and many of my recruiters have taken their black belt training and found it incredibly helpful. They've got a great set of learning modules on both diversity recruitment and military-specific recruiting. Nice. And so I'd highly recommend to your listeners to check this out. One of the most impactful and enlightening exercises is when you actually take an assessment to find out what your own implicit bias is, because this awareness is key to making the changes needed to be more mindful as you go through your day-to-day recruiting activities. So really great stuff. Check out Social Talent if you're not familiar.
Awesome. Loved all the name dropping there as far as tools go, Graham. That was a great list. Appreciate that. So a couple more questions for you. AI is another hot topic that's getting a fair share of attention these days in the recruiting space. What's your perspective on it? What kind of impact it's going to have on recruiters?
All right. Well, I think we've got to face the reality, that recruiting has a number of repetitive tasks, which makes it a prime target for the AI advancements. We've got to keep in mind that automation isn't anything new, as we've seen it more and more in everything in the world around us. And the shifting landscape to continue to take advantage of technology advances to drive our productivity is not something that's going to slow down. So are intelligent algorithms and machines going to necessarily take your job as a recruiter? From my perspective, for now, the answer is no. You're not going to lose your job to machines. But whether you notice it or not, there's likely areas of a recruiter's job that have already been impacted. So right now, the primary target are these repetitive and routine tasks for recruiters, like sifting through resume stacks and scheduling candidates, running online searches, and so on. I do think we will see the job of the recruiter continue to evolve as these traditionally mundane tasks are automated through AI, machine learning, and so on. Mm-hmm. And this will mean that there will be greater emphasis on soft skills, because the value the recruiter will bring to their jobs is the ability to perform strategic and cognitive tasks that code and algorithms just can't do as well as humans. So, my advice when recruiters are worried about their jobs is to get out there and step up your game. Become an expert at the higher level competencies of your job, mm-hmm. like the ability to make human connections, your sales and negotiating techniques, and maybe even most importantly, understanding your business so that you can better do the job of a talent advisor to help your organization realize their human capital goals. So at the core of recruiting, there's a human-to-human interaction. So I don't see a future in which machines consume the entire job category. Instead, advances in AI, machine learning, big data, and these automation activities should all be helping you excel as a recruiter, not eliminate the higher value you bring to the job. So if anything, this is just my opinion, but AI and these technological advances should make your job more enjoyable. So it should be great news for all the recruiters out there.
We shall see what happens. So last question for you, Graham. I heard you shared your wish list during your panel at this year's HR Tech Conference in Vegas. So what is on your Christmas wish list going into 2018?
Yeah, well, here's a couple other cool technologies for you. So I like Next Wave Hire for employer branding. So Next Wave provides an authentic voice for your employees to the external market through employee-generated content in a user-friendly and scalable solution. So it's been my experience that it's difficult to keep up with updated employee interviews and testimonials on your career site, and that you can leverage across your other media outlets. So I really like that NextWave's solution helps to alleviate those pain points so that you can leverage that power of the employee advocacy in a more manageable way. So they definitely make the list. I also like Teamable. So you mentioned sourcing engines. This is kind of the supercharger you could put on the employee referral program, if you will. So Teamable allows you to tap into current employee networks by matching profiles to jobs for you. And going back to the topic earlier, this solution can also be a great strategy for enhancing your diversity recruiting efforts by leveraging the networks of your existing diverse employee base. It appears to be easy to implement as a standalone login for your employees if that's the route you choose to go, or you can set up as part of a more integrated tech stack with turnkey integrations available with many of the ATS vendors like iCIMS, Lever, and others. So they make the list as well. And I guess the final one on my list, and it's been there for a few years, I really like HackerRank. Traditionally I've done a lot of engineering and R&D recruitment. And this is HackerRank's a way to enhance the engineering skills assessment and competency, and just the overall applicant experience. So their tool helps assess your specific technical bar across your engineering roles. And they've got an entire library of pre-built coding challenges for assessing various, language proficiencies and problem-solving abilities. And if they don't have a pre-built challenge that meets your specific needs, you can easily customize your own. So I think it enhances the candidate experience for technical talent through the use of these online coding challenges, as well as helps make engineering hiring more scalable from an operations perspective. So pretty simply and pretty modest list there, but I like HackerRank, I like Teamable, I like NextWave Hire. They're great tools to add to your toolkit.
Nice. Well, it should be a fun year going into next year, and we'll see what happens. Graham Pionkowski, thank you very much for joining me. Let's get you back here in 6 months.
Thanks so much, Chris. It was such a pleasure to be on your show.
Awesome. All right, well, that will do it for this edition of the RecTech Podcast. Thanks again to our sponsor. Remember to check out jobfairing.com for your next hiring event. You can subscribe to the show via iTunes, Google Play, SoundCloud, and Stitcher Radio. Hey, if you like the show, please leave a review on your channel of choice. I'd love to see your feedback or mention us on social media with the hashtag RecTech. Follow me on Twitter at Chris Russell or visit rectechmedia.com. There you can find the audio and links for this show on our blog. We'll link to Graham's bio on LinkedIn there. On the next show, we're speaking with Scott Sherman, Director of TA at Sodexo. Thanks for listening, everyone. That's a wrap. Good job, man.
Awesome.
That was great.
Thanks so much, Chris. I appreciate it. And